Children of Eleanor of Castile, Alfonso. Alfonso was born the 24th of November 1273. Alfonso was the ninth child of Edward I of England and Eleanor of Castile. Edward and Eleanor named their child after Alfonso X of Castile. It was also meant a remarkable choice given the rarity of the name. Eleanor got her brother to come to Gascony and serve as the godfather to Alfonso. Henry's two older brothers died before he was old enough to meet them. That meant he was the heir to the throne. Since Eleanor and Edward travelled quite frequently, Alfonso had his own household, even a Spanish cook. When Alfonso turned 10, he was betrothed to Floris V, Count of Holland. A few months before Alfonso was due to marry Floris, he fell ill and died. Alfonso's death at Windsor occurred shortly after his little brother Edward was born, who became the oldest surviving heir to Edward, who we all know as Edward II of England. Alfonso was buried at the chapel of Westminster Abbey, but his location in the chapel is unknown. Child number 10 is Margaret. Margaret was born on the 15th of March 1275 at Windsor Castle. Margaret married her husband John, Duke of Beaumont, in Westminster Abbey, London, on the 8th of July 1290. Margaret had a very festive wedding. It included knights in full body armour and richly dressed ladies singing as they parted through the streets of London to the music provided by the harps. Minstrels and violinists while fools danced. Their only child was John, Duke of Brabant, successor of his father, John II, Duke of Beaumont. Margaret was described as having a good-natured, merry child in her youth. She was very unhappy at the Brabant court as she was forced to accept her husband's paternal succession of mistress and the illegitimate children they bore him. All the mistress's children were raised in the court beside her son John. John was her only child, born 10 years into the marriage to the Duke. Margaret and John visited and attended the wedding of her older brother Edward I of England and Isabella of France in Bolingbroke on the 25th of January 1308. They committed the royal pair of it to England for their joint coronation at Westminster Abbey the following month. Margaret died 22 years after her husband. She died in Brantmat. She was buried at the Cathedral of St. Michael's and St. Gudula. The longest living and last surviving child of Edward I and Eleanor of Castile, dying in the reign of her nephew Edward III. Next daughter born was Mary. Mary was born the 11th of March 1278. Mary's grandmother, Eleanor of Castile, had decided to retire to a nunnery, and she lobbied for her granddaughters, Mary and Eleanor of Brittany, to become Benedictine nuns at the priory, despite the refusal of Eleanor. Mary was declared an amistress in 1285 at the age of 7, alongside 13 daughters of nobles. She was not formally veiled as a nun until December 1291. She had reached the age of 12. Mary's cousin had been veiled in March, while Eleanor, their grandmother, didn't arrive until June 1286. Edward and Eleanor granted their daughter Mary 100 per year for life, approximately 100,000 and £4,000 in 2023. She also received double the usual allowance for clothing and special things to wine from the stores. Her father visited her at the priory repeatedly, twice in 1286 and in 1289, and again in 1290 and 1291. Eleanor, her grandmother, died in 1291, and despite being a resident of the priory, Mary began to travel around the country. She visited her brother Edward in 1293 and regularly attended court, spending 5 weeks there in the year 1297, in the run-up to her sister Elizabeth's departure to Holland. Mary was unsuccessful in obtaining high office in order, whereas Eleanor of Brittany became an abbess at the nunnery in 1304. Mary died before the 8th of July in 1332. She was buried in Ambrosbury Priory. The youngest daughter born was Elizabeth. She was born the 7th of August, 1282. Elizabeth's first husband was John, Count of Holland. The offer was accepted when John was sent to England to be educated. On the 8th of January 1297, Elizabeth was married to John at Ipswich. After the wedding, Elizabeth was expected to go to Holland with her husband, but she did not want to go, leaving her husband to go alone. It is recorded that while in Ipswich, the king in some outburst threw his daughter component into the fire. After travelling around England, Elizabeth decided that she would travel to her husband's place. Her father accommodated her, travelling through the southern Netherlands between Antwerp, Mechelen, Leuven and Brussels, before ending up in Ghent. They remained for a few months, spending Christmas with the two sisters, Eleanor and Margaret. On the 10th of November 1299, John died of dysentery, though there were rumours about his marriage. This marriage was childless. When Elizabeth returned to England, she went through Brabant to see her sister Margaret. When she arrived in England, she met her stepmother, Margaret of France. Edward had married while Elizabeth was in Holland. On the 14th of November 1302, Elizabeth was married to Humphrey de Bohun, 4th Earl of Hereford, 3rd of Essex, also Constable of England. Elizabeth and Humphrey had 11 children: Margaret, Humphrey, Lady Eleanor, John, another Humphrey, Margaret, William, Edward, Agnes, Ferris, Ennis, Isabel. Elizabeth died on the 5th of May 1316. She was only 33.